Welcome to today's edition of the MIT Firehose Chat. I am Carol Urbano of the MIT Museum, and I will be your host today. Before we get started today, I would like to recognize that today, June 10th, is a day that many institutions around the world, including MIT, are celebrating shut down academia and shut down STEM. This is an opportunity for all of us to reflect and consider the ways that we might contribute to or perpetrate racism within our own institutions and communities. We are taking this time to listen, read, reflect, and learn, and really think about ways that we can contribute to ending racism in our own communities and institutions. We encourage all of you, you students that are joining us today and your teacher communities. We are the leaders of the future. We look forward to engaging you in this topic as well. We encourage you today and every day to read and listen and learn and think about ways that you can contribute to ending racism in your own communities. So why a fire hose chat? MIT former president Jerome Wisner once said, getting an education from MIT is like taking a drink from a fire hose. As you can imagine, there are so many opportunities on the MIT campus, both formal and informal learning communities to participate, and it can often be overwhelming to decide which areas to focus on. And I'm sure that today's guest, Eran Egozy, now a professor of the practice of music technology here at MIT, but a former MIT student, can attest to the many choices of learning he had to make while a student here. So now I'm going to fan it. So many of you may know Professor Egozy as the founder and chief scientist of Harmonix Music Systems, creators of Guitar Hero and Rock Band. I'm going to now hand it over to Professor Egozy. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Carol. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Carol said about where we are now, particularly here in the United States of America, where the problem of racism has been with us for a very long time. And what happens to be happening right now is that we can see it in front of our eyes much more clearly because all these actions that are happening are being videotaped, and so everyone can see them now. Unfortunately, it's nothing new, but it is waking up a lot of people to realize that maybe now is finally the time to do something about it. And so it's very inspiring to me to see a lot of folks out there actually going out, taking to the streets, and protesting and seeing, and we're seeing a lot of activity there. And here in the States, we're also starting to see some discussion of modifying the laws and rules and practices in this country. But all that's the only way things actually can change is if all of us as individuals make an effort to change. And we can start by educating ourselves. And so there's a lot of great resources out there, and I think we will be posting some. There's already some in the chat right now, so I encourage you to find your place. Where are you in this education plan that we all have to have, whether you're starting from the beginning or you already know a lot about it? Find your place and move ahead from there. Great. Let me move on to a little bit of my history. I am now a professor of the practice here at MIT in music technology. I've only been here for about 5 years in this role, but I was actually at MIT as an undergraduate student before that. And my role has, I've always had these two interests in my life. One is music, and the other is computers. And actually, I have a little slideshow here that maybe I'll be able to share. So let me share my screen here. And I hope you can see a copy of this. Okay, so this is me back in 1983. I was 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old, and you can see here I'm playing my clarinet. And also, a few years later, this computer came out. It's the Apple II, and my parents got me this computer. I was very interested in computers and in music. And with a friend of mine, back then we learned how to program the computer to make music. And I wrote in assembly language, which is something that, oh, is it still? Right, so what I had this project in mind when I was a kid. Could I take a computer program that I wrote myself in assembly language and make it sound like Beethoven? So I once got the score to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and I decided that I would enter every single note. And you have to keep in mind, back then we didn't have a mouse or any kind of user interface that would make this friendly. I actually literally had to translate every note of Beethoven's symphony, whether it was a G sharp or an E or an F or whatever the note was and how long it was, and actually enter it by typing these hexadecimal numbers. And I did this every day after school for probably 2 or 3 hours a day, like maybe after doing my homework, maybe not. But at any rate, it was a labor of love, and it was the first time that I really thought about how computers can be involved in making music. And so that was kind of the beginning. And after a little while, I continued playing my clarinet. Here I am in high school. It's 1989, and I'm playing a clarinet concerto with a high school band. In 1989, I got into MIT, and I was an undergrad for 4 years, and majored in electrical engineering and computer science. Music was always still a big part of my life, but I didn't really know how to combine the two like I had before. In other words, I loved playing music and had my music friends and played chamber music and orchestra and band and all kinds of great musical activities at MIT, performing mostly. And also I studied computer science and mathematics and engineering. But it wasn't until around 1993 to 95, when I was a student at the Media Lab, that I really was able to combine the two experiences together. And here's Todd Mackover, who was my advisor at the time. He's still there. This fellow here is Yo-Yo Ma. You might know the name and the picture. This is back when he was much younger, but still a phenomenal cellist back then. We worked with Yo-Yo to create a cello that could automatically interpret his gestures, how he was moving the bow, how he was fingering, in order to enhance his musical ability. So a set of computers were sensing his motions and then enhancing what he can do musically. And then you can see here a picture of me and my buddy Alex Fergopoulos. The two of us were office mates at the Media Lab. And when we graduated in '95, that's when we decided to start our company, Harmonix Music Systems. And you can see here, Harmonix has had a very long and fairly successful run. I am no longer there in a full-time capacity. I'm the chief scientist, which means I advise a little bit. But you can see we made a whole lot of different games over time. And in particular, we started with some games like the Axe and Frequency and Amplitude, some karaoke games that you've probably never heard of. And it was only around here, kind of about in the middle point, at about 2005, that we came out with the game Guitar Hero. We had a mission at Harmonix, which was to let everyone in the world experience the joy of making music. And I'm happy to say that is still a big part of what Harmonix is all about and what we're trying to do. And the reason we're doing this is because, especially for those of us who play music, we know how wonderful of a feeling it is to play music, and how great it is. Um, and the issue is that that not everyone has that great feeling. In fact, if you've ever taken piano lessons, you know, you might you might find this somewhat instructive. It's not always the most exciting thing in the world. And I think the problem is not the music. The problem might be in how we approach teaching the music, or the fact that it's actually quite difficult to master a musical instrument to the point where you are proficient, you know? And so while this is the look that a lot of us have when maybe we're taking piano lessons, this is kind of the look we want to have, right? The folks who have gotten to the level of mastery that is just absolutely incredible really feel music, and they feel emotional about it. And when they create music, their brain is in this awesome state of joy and ecstasy, and they're communicating that to the audience. You know, here we have B.B. King and Jimi Hendrix, both amazing musicians and guitarists in their own right. And so here's kind of this thing that this graph that I think is sort of instructive. If you look at this blue line, this graph shows kind of how long it takes to master an instrument. You know, from the beginning where you are having to spend a lot of time on it, until eventually you get to the point where you're starting to sound pretty good. But in the very beginning, you don't sound very good, and it takes a lot of time. Possibly with the exception of the kazoo, where, hey, it doesn't take too long to sound as good as you possibly can on a kazoo, but hey, who wants to play a kazoo for very long? The question we were asking at Harmonix is, could we get to this area, what I call the zone of enjoyment, faster? Could we have some kind of situations where we create some kind of new instrument, or some kind of computer device, or some kind of game, or something that allows us to feel like we are creating great sounding music, and to have the output quality of what we're creating be really good, even though we don't have to necessarily spend a huge amount of time getting there, because often a lot of us don't get there and then give up in frustration. And then music can be maybe a thing we do casually. Maybe we enjoy listening to music, but the real pleasure comes in being more active in music, being more active in creating music or performing music. And so those kind of thoughts essentially led to the games Guitar Hero and Rock Band, where we were specifically trying to give people that feeling, that wonderful feeling of playing music, and being involved in something that's bigger than themselves, and sounding good. And that's kind of the whole point of how we created this game. What you see here is an example of the audio for a particular Guitar Hero song. And what we realized is that in order to make people sound good, we want to still play the entire audio track of the song, of the original song that you're used to hearing. Except we made it so that you don't have to play every note. And so, as you can see here, the red dots show you the location of every single note that's being played by the guitar. And in fact, sometimes those are the notes that we actually do ask you to play if you're playing on the hard mode or expert mode. But also there's an easy mode where you can play the game, and you're still hearing this, you're still hearing the great guitar track, but you're only playing the important notes, a few notes here and there. And so we got this nice situation going where, as a novice musician, you can still perform musical actions by playing your guitar or your plastic guitar. Yet what you hear is the original guitar track. And then as you get better in the game and your finger dexterity improves, you can then over time become more of a master of this instrument. Now, of course, it's not a real guitar; it's still a plastic instrument. But one of the things that we have been very heartened to see over the years is that people who play these games, Guitar Hero and Rock Band, do eventually move on to, or some of them move on to play a real instrument, a real guitar, or a real drum. So I just kind of thought I'd give you a little bit of sort of history about where I came from, what we were interested in doing, and how Harmonix kind of initially addressed this this issue. So that is kind of one. Maybe should I pause here and ask for some questions, Carol?
This is a good place to pause. I actually asked in the chat of our participants for folks to raise their hand if they've ever played Guitar Hero or Rock Band. So it looks like we have a few that have experience.
Oh, cool. I see that now. Yeah.
It looks like about at least half, if not more, have played one of the two games.
That's great. Good to hear. Because those
So
games were made a long time ago.
I think it's still, we still definitely have a Guitar Hero in this house as in the basement. Yeah, it comes out every once in a while. Still.
Yes, I know what you mean.
And I appreciate I always had to do the vocals, and the only reason I was a contributor in the family games was because I knew the words.
Yes,
not because I knew the pitch. So
in fact, we had a rule that the singer gets to choose the song.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That everyone plays, because it's sort of the most exposed part of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So while I'm posing some questions to Professor Egozy, I'm going to let folks know that this is a good time, if you have questions for him, to enter them into the Q&A pod. And if you see a question that somebody else has already asked, you can upvote it and say that you like that question too. So we do have one question already. And one of our participants is asking if you, at this point in your musical career, if you're still in the zone of enjoyment after all these years in the music industry.
Oh, yes, I certainly am. Thanks for that question. So in addition, like I was saying, in addition to developing software and video games, I have been playing clarinet. You saw the pictures of me playing in high school. But I continue to play all through MIT and also after MIT. So I'm lucky enough to also be in a professional music group called Radius Ensemble, which is here in the Boston area. And we play about 4 concerts a year, and I'm in a few other musical groups as well. So I continue to have the pleasure of making music, but you still have to practice. You know, I have to practice every day for about an hour in order to stay in shape enough to continue to stay in that zone. If I let it go, and that does happen sometimes, then I need to essentially build up my skill to get back into that zone.
Great. Did you ever think that Guitar Hero would have such a big impact on the gaming world?
Good question. No, I did not. I had no idea. In fact, it took me kind of by surprise. You have to realize that Guitar Hero was developed and we put it out in 2005, the year 2005. And remember, Harmonix started in 1995. So when we started, we were very eager, starting a new company. It was very exciting. We had a lot of great ideas. And it took a very long time before Guitar Hero happened. In fact, there was a period of about 4 years where we were not even making video games. We were trying to make musical experiences that let people feel like musicians, experiencing the joy of making music. And unfortunately, those were not very successful. And even after we started making video games, where we thought maybe using video games as the vehicle to let people experience this joy of making music, maybe that was the way to do it. Even then, it took quite a long time. So we had made, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 7 or 8 video games before Guitar Hero, and they did okay, but none of them were particularly successful. And so when we created the game Guitar Hero, or when we developed it with our partner Red Octane, we loved the game. we thought it was a great game, but because of our experience, we did not really have much of an expectation that it would do anything better than our previous games. And boy, were we surprised, pleasantly so.
We have a couple of questions about the logistics of creating Guitar Hero, and then I want to kind of go after that. We'll move on to some of your other current work and future work.
Great.
One is about kind of the logistics around making the guitar itself. Like, what were the challenges of creating that tool?
I see. Yeah. So the thing to note about Guitar Hero is it has two components. It has the hardware component and the software component. We partnered with a company called Red Octane. They were out of California, and they specialized in making game hardware. In fact, if some of you know the game Dance Dance Revolution, they had not developed that game. That was Konami, but they created the dance mat, a high-end version of the dance mat that you could buy and have a better experience using Dance Dance Revolution. And they approached us at some point saying, hey, we would like to make a game where we're more an integral part of the game as opposed to kind of an aftermarket product. And that's when we agreed that we would make a guitar game. They would produce the hardware and we would produce the software. It was nice that they had experience in this kind of business already. So they had relationships with factories in China to create these game controllers. And we worked together on the design of the guitar. And one funny story is that we at Harmonix had told them that the guitar really had to have a whammy bar as part of the guitar, you know, the thing that lets you pitch bend the notes. And initially they were a little skeptical or worried because that adds cost. And whenever you're creating a game like this, you're always mindful of still needing to make the game cheap enough to create so that you can sell it for a reasonable price. And they were quite concerned this was going to add cost to the game. And yet we told them, no, you have to put it in there. It's so crucial for this game. And honestly, we didn't really know how we were going to use it in the game at that point in time yet. We just knew that it had to be there. And then the onus was on us at Harmonix to figure out how to add the whammy bar into Guitar Hero in a compelling way. And so that's when the game mechanic came up of star power, where you would use the whammy bar on sustained notes to be able to earn extra credit. And it was a pretty fun part of the game, I thought.
Someone else is also interested in kind of the business side of, like, how did you manage getting all the rights to the songs and choosing what artists to work with? And
No, that's a great question, and it's a very astute point. When you make a game or anything really that uses music, unless it's your own music and that you've written for that purpose, you have to license that music. That music belongs to someone else, and you can't just take it. And in Guitar Hero, we first came up with our ideal soundtrack, all the songs that we thought we wanted in the game. Though at the same time, we would have to license all those songs. And not all the songs were available for licensing. Or in other words, when we approached various artists or record labels or publishers, they didn't necessarily say, yes, you can have rights to the song. So we found a pretty good balance of what we wanted versus what we could have. And all those artists who created those, who wrote those songs, did receive royalties for every copy of Guitar Hero sold. The thing that's interesting to note about the game Guitar Hero in particular is that we only secured rights to what's known as the publishing rights, meaning the rights of the composition. The person who wrote that song gets credit and gets a royalty, gets paid every time a copy is sold, but we did not secure rights to the actual band who played that song. So what we had to do is we had to essentially create that recording ourselves, and we used a music studio out in California called Wave Group, and they essentially created what are known as sound-alikes. These are recordings that are not the original band, but they sound pretty close to what people think of as the original song. And in fact, those are the songs that you get to play in Guitar Hero. And it was a little bit later on when we made Rock Band that the music industry became more aware of what we were doing and also more interested in licensing to us the actual original soundtracks. So when you play a game in Rock Band, you are actually playing the original parts, the original band parts, guitars, drums, vocals, everything that the band originally recorded.
Mhm. So, and if you were to continue to work on Guitar Hero today, knowing what you know now, are there other tweaks or additions or things that you would do to change it, tweak it, make it more playable?
Yeah, well, so what's interesting is that we've actually continued. Now we don't develop Guitar Hero anymore because Guitar Hero is now owned by Activision. So Red Octane, which was that company that I was telling you about that made the guitars, Activision, which is a very large game publisher, bought them, and so now Activision actually owns the rights to Guitar Hero, and they continued making the game for a while, and then at some point they stopped. Meanwhile, Harmonix, we at some point got bought by MTV, which is part of Viacom, and that's how Rock Band was born. We essentially created the game Rock Band for MTV. Harmonix owns that game, owns the rights to Rock Band. It's our property, and we've continued to develop it. Actually, even though no new hardware has come out for Rock Band in quite some time, maybe in about 5 years, we know that there's a pretty loyal audience that is still playing Rock Band every day, and those folks are actually really interested in new songs that come out. And so every week at Harmonix, we still put out new songs to be played on Rock Band. So what's nice is even though the game is somewhat old at this point, there are still new songs to play on it every day. And tweaks always happen. There's new modes of play. There's been various head-to-head and battle modes and things like that. So we're still trying to make it kind of an innovative and fun experience. And we listen to feedback from our players and try to incorporate that and improve the game over time.
So I'm going to use this question to kind of transition to some of your more current work.
Okay.
But we do have one of our students is interested in what made you kind of step away from Harmonix to what you're focusing on now, and then what does that look like?
So great. So like I said, I was at Harmonix for 20 years, and it was a great time. But honestly, I noticed that I was not doing the things that I really wanted to do anymore. So I'm an engineer. I develop software. I love building things. That's kind of what I like to do. I like making music and I like building things. And for a long time, that's exactly what I was doing at Harmonix, and it was wonderful. But as the company grew and I was the chief technology officer, which meant that I was in a managerial position. And so my job became more about managing the company and hiring people and setting technical direction for the company. And I noticed that I wasn't really building as much anymore. And that made me, maybe a little sad, that I wasn't sort of doing the thing that I really wanted to be doing. And the thing I think I was good at doing. And so I managed to essentially step off the management team, which means that I was no longer going to the weekly management meetings, and I arranged for myself to have a different role in the company, and that role was more project-based, where I could actually work on new technologies, and I had a great time doing that. And around that same time, I got a call from MIT, from actually an old professor of mine who taught me music theory. And he said, "Hey, Eran, would you like to come to MIT to teach a class?" And I'd never done that. I'd never taught a class before. But now all of a sudden I was in this position where I was no longer managing the company. And because of that, I had a little bit more freedom. And I was able to say yes. And I have this, little maxim that I like to go by, which is that I try to say yes if I can. If opportunities come up, and a lot of times opportunities come up that are out of left field and you had no idea that they were even there. And if you can sort of say yes to them or even consider that, then I think it makes life more interesting and might lead you to new directions. And so I've never really had a major plan, like a life plan. I just kind of did the thing that I was doing and sort of thought about, is this what I want to be doing? And and then be open to opportunities coming up. And so the MIT opportunity was completely unplanned. I wouldn't have guessed that that would be what I would be doing. I took some time off to develop this class. The class is called Interactive Music Systems at MIT. It is a class that I offer mostly to juniors and seniors who have a computer background and a music background. It's the class that I always wanted to take if I were at MIT, and it's also a class that where I've taken a lot of the lessons that I've learned from Harmonix and kind of packed them into this class. And that's what I've been doing now at MIT for the past 5 years.
Can you talk a little bit about your recent experience with MIT students around the virtual graduation and Comusica?
Oh, sure. So yeah, should I just play the whole thing? I think that might be kind of nice to do if people haven't seen this.
So maybe if you want to give us a little bit of context before you play it, that might be helpful.
Yeah, so let me see if I can just get, I just want to get the YouTube thing here ready. Okay. So, okay, I'll just kind of, I guess I'll give you a little.
And one, I will let you know about this family of schools that we're talking to their students. They also have a collaboration with Juilliard, and so most of the students are playing musical instruments on an ongoing basis every year.
Great.
So for example, if right now I asked how many people that are attending right now, raise your hand if you are currently playing and studying a musical instrument.
Wow, it's a lot of people. Awesome.
So,
this is great. Great to hear.
A lot.
Good. Okay, this is great. So this sort of goes back to do you remember when I was telling you about my focus, which is to let everyone experience the joy of making music? So you all know what I'm talking about. And what happened a few months ago was, since the whole coronavirus situation happened and unfolded here very quickly, to where within just 1 week, all the MIT students were told they had to go back home. And it was maybe about a month or two after that that we got the announcement that commencement would not happen in person. Commencement is where everyone gets their degrees, and it's a beautiful ceremony. I remember my commencement very well when I was graduating from MIT. And the committee who was in charge of commencement all of a sudden had to pivot and make a virtual commencement. And they had to figure out what to do for that. They contacted a friend of mine, Evan Ziporn, who is faculty at MIT in the music department, a composer who I've worked with on projects in the past. And he contacted me and said, hey, is there something we can do together? And we kind of talked about it and had this idea of writing a piece of music. And Evan is the composer, so he would write the piece of music. We would count how many notes there were in that piece. And it turns out there were about 800 or 850 or something like that. And I had this idea of getting every student at MIT who's graduating to musically contribute somehow to this piece. And what we arrived with is, well, maybe everyone can sing one note. And the idea is that, of course, if you're a musician, like some of you are, or if you're a singer, you can probably sing lots of notes and you can probably sing in tune, which is great. But I think most people might have a hard time with that. But if we ask them just to sing one note, right, everyone can sing one note. So that was the basic idea. Let's have everyone sing one note. And then using a bunch of code and software and technology and algorithms, we could assemble them all together into a piece of music. It was a huge undertaking. And we had a lot of great help from all kinds of people around MIT, including a submissions website. We created a website that was specifically dedicated to this, where if you were a graduating MIT student, you could go to this website, click on a few buttons, and then record yourself singing a note. And so you would have people singing like, oh, just a single note like that, or maybe just da. Okay, we had all these videos, about 800 in total, and then our job was to turn them into a piece of music. We did that. We also had a video team that had an idea of how to create this music and have it be part of almost a story or a journey. MIT students walking down the Infinite Corridor, which is a very well-known part of MIT that students undertake that journey every day. And the result was what I'm about to show you. It's called CoMusica, and it essentially celebrates the graduating students of MIT, the class of 2020, and tries to have them all be part of one singular musical experience. So I will share my screen and let you guys have a look at it.
Hello, I'm Eran Egozy, class of '95 and professor of music technology here at MIT. You're about to hear a piece of music composed specifically for today's commencement. But there's a twist. We asked the MIT community, and in particular this year's graduates, to sing a single note and be part of a collective experience that we are calling CoMusica. We received over 800 contributions, and then our amazing team of MIT coders, videographers, and sound designers stitched them all together into a collaborative work that celebrates our graduating students coming together as one MIT. I hope you enjoy it.
All right. So that's the video. That's the final product that we showed at commencement.
Yeah, I think that was a really powerful and well-received sort of community experience, which was a really nice way to bring together people who weren't able to be together, in physically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are going to go back to some Q&A. If you would like to, if you're in a position where you can have your line unmuted and you want to ask a question verbally, you can raise your hand and we'll take some of those. I also know some students North Anglia schools have a thing called Global Campus. And so students ask some questions on Global Campus already. And so I wanted to share a couple of those while folks are thinking about additional questions they want to ask, maybe about some of your new work. So one student is asking, are there specific people in your life that encouraged you to play music and to continue to have music in your life, or was that a passion you found on your own?
Oh yeah, so. Right, my parents actually were great about this. There's also an interesting story here. I was born in Israel. We moved to the United States when I was about 11 years old, and apparently, this is what my parents told me long after I had been playing clarinet. They said that back in Israel, they took me to the local conservatory one day, probably when I was maybe 5 or 6, and I think I remember this day where I had an audition of some kind. Maybe the instructor there asked me to play the piano or sing a little bit, and then sort of nothing happened after that, and so I kind of forgot about it. When I was in the States, in America, my parents asked me if I wanted to play an instrument, clarinet, and I said, sure. I actually came up with clarinet because I think I once saw a TV program about clarinet and it seemed kind of cool. Later on, they told me that that audition experience that I had in Israel was interesting. The teacher who auditioned me told my parents that I had no musical talent and that it really was going to be a waste of time to try to teach me anything related to music because, there was just no point. And so my parents never played any instruments. And so they said, well, okay, I guess it's not worth investing in that. But it was when we got to America and they thought, well, maybe we'll give this another try and we'll ask Eran if he wants to try playing an instrument because they'd never actually asked me before. And when I said sure, and they found me a teacher, and actually it turns out I loved it. And I had a really wonderful teacher in the beginning that really encouraged me. And I'm so glad that happened. I'm so glad that my parents decided to just give it another shot, just in case, and it worked out great.
I think we're glad they gave it another shot too.
Yeah, my life would be very different now if that was not the case.
It's very interesting how small things can make.
Small little decisions, small little decisions can make a big difference.
So this is a very interesting question from a student at the British International School of Beijing, Shunyi, who's curious about whether or not people ever actively discouraged you from making music accessible to all and kind of taking away from this attention on more traditional methods of music, passion, and instruction.
So good question. We did receive some criticism after Guitar Hero and Rock Band became very popular, where people were saying, "Well, look, kids are doing an amazing job of learning how to play these games, and they're learning all these skills about playing a plastic guitar, which doesn't really translate to a real instrument, So why are they spending hours and hours and hours practicing something that is not a real instrument? That's basically just a game controller." And I think there's some validity to that criticism. But what we found is that um, in quite a number of cases, students who or kids who were playing these games actually went on to study a real instrument. We were surveying guitar teachers in the area, and we found that after Guitar Hero came out, the number of people interested in guitar and guitar lessons went up appreciably. And it was kind of cool to see that actually had an effect. I don't, you have to keep in mind, it depends on what kind of context you have. If you're thinking about it from a music point of view, you might be worried about these games interfering with music. But I think of it as more something else. I think of it as there's a bunch of kids who are playing games all the time. And a lot of the games can be kind of violent and destructive games, like shooting games and all that kind of thing. And what I was hoping we were doing was actually giving the gamers an opportunity to play a game that is constructive and that is creative instead of destructive. And maybe some of those kids would then take this enjoyable feeling of knowing what it's like to play music and do something useful with it.
So I have a question here about what continues to spark your curiosity and how will that kind of drive the future of your work?
Oh boy, what sparks my curiosity? Well, I'm interested in a lot of different things, but I'm trying to still be focused on music and how technology can improve our musical lives, and I think that's a pretty broad overall area, and it has a lot of tiny little details in it that can make things interesting. So for example, just thinking about music in a way that's I don't know if it's more mathematical or more engineering. I'm trained as an engineer, so I think of the world in an engineering way, which means that I think of it as components that can be broken down into parts, and those parts, if they're too complicated, can be broken down into smaller parts. And if you're solving a problem and it's too overwhelming, you just see what the small parts are that you can solve, and then over time you can get to a big solution. And you can kind of see that line of thinking in the Comusica experience that you just saw, right? I sort of have this natural instinct of thinking of music as something that can be broken down, and it doesn't necessarily need one fancy master musician to kind of put the whole thing together. A lot of people can contribute in their own way and still be part of a musical experience, and I think that's an area that I've always loved, and I'm always kind of looking for ways to help people experience music more deeply using technology. And there's a few other examples that we could get into if we have time that kind of touch on the same thing.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody would like to ask a question verbally. Please raise your hand and I'll get to that.
Yes, please do. Raise your hand.
So one of the other things that folks are interested in is the entrepreneurship side of things. So when you're thinking about these new areas of work and potential new innovations, or say you have an idea and you want to start a company, like what does that process look like? Who do you partner with? How do you get money to get started?
Yeah. Those are all good. Yeah, I know. The thing about entrepreneurship is isn't just one way. There's no one right way of doing it. There's no specific formula. And maybe that's what makes it hard, but maybe that's what makes it interesting. It's really one of these cases where you are essentially judged or evaluated on what you end up producing and what you make. And if what you make has impact, then no one really cares how you got there. It's just amazing that you did. There are lots of resources around MIT to help with entrepreneurship and startups. We had some available to us at MIT when we were starting. There was a competition called today it's called the 100K competition, which is a $100,000 prize for the winner in an entrepreneurship competition. Back when we were at MIT, it was called the 10K, and there was only $10,000, and we did not even win. We didn't even win that competition. But what it did do for us is that it introduced us to people who could help. And we met we met a number of our early mentors who kind of helped show us around. And MIT right now has the Venture Mentoring Service, which is a group of volunteers who help startups with advice. There is the Martin Trust Center at MIT, which is run out of the Sloan School of Management, that helps people with new ideas and how to pitch those ideas and how to create a compelling presentation for investors and how to play around with the idea. There's the Sandbox Studio at MIT, run out of the School of Engineering, which tries to incubate ideas. Even if you have just a smidgen of an idea and you're not quite sure where it's going to go, they'll give you a little bit of money to spend some time working on it. And I think, at least for me, the thing that worked well was to think about entrepreneurship in the context of where I was in life at the time. And I was lucky that this opportunity came up to start a company when I was young, and I did not have many responsibilities. I was not married yet. I did not have a family. And so I could live really cheaply. You know, I had a tiny little apartment, and I basically continued to stay to have the lifestyle of a student, you know, very meager, while we developed our ideas and raised some money. At the time, someone was asking about how do you raise money. So we actually raised money initially from friends and family, and managed to. Alex had some friends, and I had some friends, and 5,000 here, 10,000 there, and soon we had $100,000 to get started. That was enough to last us a full year. And after that, we were able to make connections with investors who were, you know, who had more experience and were able to invest in bigger companies. And so you just take one step at a time. You know, you start with what you know and what's around you, and try to build on that. And eventually, that's how we got there.
So, do you have any final suggestions or advice for young people looking for ways to find their passion? And
Yes, definitely. So I think it's just so important to develop a sense of what you like to do and what drives you. And I don't think it's that easy to do necessarily. Like, for example, even when I was at MIT and I knew that I liked engineering, I ended up in this group as an undergrad doing research, part of a program here we call Europe, the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. And I was there for 3 years. And I thought it's what I should be doing, because here I was at MIT, and this was a very important group in computer architecture and network design and chip design and all this kind of stuff. And honestly, I kind of found it boring. And but I was nervous about that, because I thought it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And luckily for me, I had an advisor, and I mustered up enough courage to go and tell him, you know, I'm not sure this is for me necessarily. And he said, oh, I'm glad you told me that. You should go try other things. And he gave me a name of someone at the Media Lab, someone named Mike Hawley. He knew that I was into music, and he said, talk to this guy. And I went over there, and it just opened my world up to, or opened my eyes up to this new world of different things that I could do. And I think that's kind of, for me at least, it's been an important thing to have in the back of my mind, not to try to overcommit to a plan too soon, and to keep your eyes open for how you might want to change what you're doing. Because I think there are people who end up in a career where they think it's what they should be doing for any number of reasons or pressures or whatnot, whether it's external or your own internal sense of yourself. And, you know, shake that around a little bit, kind of find a way to really see the thing that you love doing, and then see if you can turn that into something that you actually can do every day. But there's nothing more wonderful than being able to have your career be the thing that you actually love doing, and the reason that you want to get up every morning and do the work that you want to do.
sounds good. It also looks like you might have an open invitation to Ecuador. Some of our Ecuador students from Ecuador are wondering if you've ever been there.
Oh, no, I have not been to Ecuador. That
On the
sounds
to-do
great.
list when the world
Yes,
returns to its
when the
normal
world
state.
returns to normal. Right.
Right?
Ask me in the winter time. I think that's a good time to ask me about
Oh, okay.
that. When we're all
Duly
freezing over
noted.
here. Yeah, when we're all freezing here, and then yes. Uh-huh.
Duly noted. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and for all of our students for the thoughtful questions. I know we didn't get to quite all of them, but we hope that you enjoyed this time getting to know Professor Egozy. For those of you that will be joining us for our next session, we will have that on June 24th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and that'll be featuring our very own Curiosity correspondent, Fatima Hussein, a graduate who's doing work here in a lab here at MIT, and she'll be talking about astrobiology and the ancient Earth. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and for your ongoing support, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Professor Egozy.